Stepmom falsely accused me of assault to block my inheritance at 21. Dad believed her and cut me off. 7 years later, he learned the truth. When I was 21, my stepmother falsely accused me of assault to prevent me from inheriting my father's wealth. My dad believed her and cut me off. 7 years later, he discovered the truth. Hello everyone. My biological parents divorced when I was 9, and they shared equal custody of me. I spent weekdays with my mom, who lived near my school, and weekends with my dad. Despite their separation, both parents were always kind and gentle towards me. While I was sad they were not together, I understood they both loved me deeply. A few years later, my dad met Gina, who would become my stepmother. When I was 11, my dad introduced her to me. She seemed nice, and my dad was clearly happy. He hoped we would get along well. Gina had twin daughters, Emma and Emily, who were 14 at the time. Raised without their father, the twins were quite immature and would throw public tantrums if they didn't get their way. As an introvert, I quietly observed their behavior. After a year of dating, my dad and Gina decided to marry when I was 12. Even my mom attended the wedding. I was excited to have a new family member. Initially, I thought my stepmother and I got along well. However, a few months after their honeymoon, she told me one morning that she didn't really like me. She said we needed to pretend to get along for my dad's sake when he was around. She also told me to stay out of her way when he wasn't there because she couldn't stand the sight of me, as I reminded her of my mom. Hearing her harsh words broke my heart. I had genuinely liked her and hoped for a good relationship. The twins overheard her and later teased me, saying my dad didn't love me and preferred them. I remember crying and telling my mom about it. She immediately called my dad and gave him an earful. My dad assured her that my stepmom would never say such things and that I must have misunderstood her. The following weekend, when I visited my father, my stepmother appeared upset. She stayed silent in front of my dad, but as soon as he left, she angrily whispered to me, threatening that she would ensure I no longer had a dad in my life if I ever told my mom anything about her. She also warned that she would divorce my dad and take all his money, leaving him destitute if I didn't keep quiet. At just 12 years old, I was terrified for my dad, so I nodded in agreement. From that day on, Gina made it her mission to make my life miserable in every way possible. Being a child, I felt I had to endure it silently. Whenever we were alone, she would say hurtful things to me and I would stay silent, hoping she would eventually stop bullying me. She would insult my height and weight, calling me ugly. I hoped my dad would notice, but he never did. He believed Gina and I had a good relationship and would often force me to go shopping and eat out with her and the kids. She would use my dad's card to pay for our meals but wouldn't let me eat anything substantial at the restaurant. I was only allowed to have soup or dessert, no main course. I would sit there miserably, watching them finish their meals while crying quietly. I would return home hungry and she would force me to go to bed without eating. Many nights I cried myself to sleep, both hungry and exhausted from her cruelty. At that point, I was at my wit's end, scared, angry, and frustrated with both my stepmom and my dad. This is why I dreaded visiting my dad on weekends. Every Friday evening, I would try to avoid visiting by coming up with excuses like a stomach ache so I could stay with my mom. My parents started noticing, and my dad would call, expressing sadness at not seeing me. My mom would urge me to tell her if something was wrong, but I always kept quiet, still scared of Gina's threats. When I was 14, my dad decided to take the whole family, including me, on a trip to Greece. Initially, I didn't want to go, but my mother told me it was a good opportunity to travel and see the world, so I reluctantly agreed to join them. As usual, Gina pretended to be sweet and kind in front of my dad, asking about school as if she genuinely cared. I noticed she would subtly tease me in her sweet voice, making hurtful comments that wouldn't outright portray her as mean. For example, whenever I mentioned playing basketball, she would joke that I needed to be taller for that sport, even though I was quite tall for my age. She would then say I should focus more on studies if I ever wanted to be successful. The twins would smirk and call me names like meathead, even though I had better grades than them. My dad would notice but choose to ignore it. Whenever I expressed that her comments hurt me, my dad insisted she was just teasing and that I should lighten up. Gina would nod and tell my dad that I had no sense of humor and needed to learn to have fun. This continued throughout the vacation. One day, in a moment of anger when she and the twins were teasing me about my weight while I was trying to enjoy the pool, I decided to retaliate. I told the twins that their double chins were embarrassing, watching their faces fall. I then turned to Gina and told her she shouldn't wear a shrug over her bikini because her huge stomach was still visible, making her look like a penguin. Gina's face turned red with embarrassment, and she ran back to the hotel room. The twins started yelling at me, calling me sexist and saying how horrible it was for me to say such things about them. Later, my dad confronted me, clearly angry. He asked if I had really spoken to my stepmother and stepsisters like that, and when I admitted it, he lectured me about how he had raised me better and that I should never talk to a woman about her weight. I argued back that they were criticizing my weight, looks, and height, but my dad forced me to apologize to Gina, who had locked herself in the bathroom crying after what I said. Gina and the twins made a big show of accepting my apologies. When I got home, I told my mom everything. She spoke to my dad, who tried to blame me for the whole situation. My mother threatened to call CPS on him if Gina ever commented on my weight or looks again. This scared my dad, and after that, Gina never said anything to me. However, she and the twins would blatantly ignore me whenever my dad wasn't around, which I honestly didn't mind. When I was 16, my mom went away for a few days, so I stayed with my dad and Gina. Gina complained about having to cook for one more person, so on my last night, I decided to make dinner since my mom had taught me to cook from a young age to be independent. Gina wanted to invite some friends over when she heard I was cooking. I prepared the meal, set the table, and served dinner. Everyone loved the food and praised me. My dad decided to do the dishes, so I went to my room. From there, I heard Gina and her friends talking loudly outside my window. Her friends were saying how lucky she was to have a nice husband and a great house. When they mentioned how nice it was that I cooked for them, Gina went on a rant about how annoying I was and that she couldn't stand seeing my face. She told her friends she couldn't wait until I was 18 so she wouldn't have to see me every weekend. When one of her friends mentioned again how nice I seemed, Gina admitted she had hoped I would fail at cooking so she could blame me for something. This shocked me because I was trying to be polite to her, even though I knew she hated me. As time went on, Gina's dislike for me only grew. During college, when I visited my dad for a few days at his insistence, Gina would completely ignore me. She would schedule family activities with just dad and the twins or her and the twins, leaving me at home. If I woke up late during my vacation, she would yell at me, calling me lazy and inconsiderate, even though I always cleaned up after myself. I knew I was always respectful to her because my dad would be furious if I wasn't. Despite being polite and careful not to upset her, it felt like nothing I did was ever enough. She was also inconsiderate of my privacy. She would loudly enter my room while I was sleeping, waking me up or barging in without knocking, making me extremely uncomfortable. She would randomly search my room and look under my bed for reasons unknown to me. She refused to pick up dinner for me but did so for the family, never inviting me to join them. Despite this, I kept quiet, tried to stay out of the way, and spent time with dad whenever possible. Now, on to the main incident. When I turned 21, my dad invited me to visit him, saying he had some important news to share. It had been a while since I last visited, so I felt a bit apprehensive, but my mother encouraged me, saying it was good news. I agreed and booked my tickets. Upon arrival, my dad greeted me warmly at the airport, and we drove back to his place. I asked him about the news, but he said he would reveal everything during the family dinner. When we arrived, I noticed the twins were home too. It had been a while since I had seen Emma and Emily. They didn't acknowledge my presence, and I didn't acknowledge theirs either. That night, during dinner, my dad started by expressing how proud he was to have 3 wonderful children. He spoke about his gratitude for having such a loving family and wanted to share some exciting news. The atmosphere was positive, and I felt a sense of anticipation as he continued speaking. He looked at each of us with a smile, including Gina, who had been giving me icy glares all day. My dad went on to say that he had recently lost a friend to a heart attack, which made him realize how lucky he was to have us. He had spoken to a lawyer and made a will. Upon hearing the word will, Gina and the twins perked up with excitement. Dad said he had decided to leave the house to my stepmom, as she was his wife. Gina beamed with pride and kissed him on the cheek. My dad's house was a 5-bedroom place, and if Gina ever decided to sell it, she could make a fortune. Dad then announced he was leaving his entire retirement account and his car to me. This wasn't just any car, it was a vintage car he had spent a lot of time and money maintaining. The car held sentimental value for both of us, as he often shared stories of his youth and adventures associated with it. As I processed this information, I realized that leaving the car to me was his way of expressing his love. As my dad spoke about his pride in me inheriting the car, Gina's expression shifted from pride to discontent. She exchanged glances with the twins, who seemed equally displeased. It was clear that the idea of me inheriting a significant sum of money and the beloved vintage car stoked their resentment. Dad, apparently unaware of the tension in the room, continued to explain how he would leave the joint bank account he shared with Gina to the twins. Since Gina was a homemaker, the money was entirely my dad's. He expressed his wish for the account to be equally divided between them, assuring them they would have money and a house to live in. so they needn't worry if anything happened to him. I thought this arrangement was fair and had no issues with it. However, the twins immediately voiced their disappointment, saying they had expected more. They argued that my dad should also leave them his retirement account, claiming I didn't need it anyway. When my dad questioned their reasoning, Gina chimed in, stating that as a guy I should find my own way, whereas they were women and needed more money for financial security. My dad reminded Gina that he had already taken care of their college funds and now they were also getting a house and a bank account, so they had nothing to worry about. Despite this, Gina kept insisting that I didn't deserve so much money. My dad firmly reiterated that his decision was final. I sat quietly, observing as the argument escalated. Suddenly, Gina burst into tears. We looked at her, startled, and my dad reassured her that there was no need to cry since he had divided everything fairly. Through her sobs, Gina claimed she had kept silent for years to protect the family but couldn't hold it in any longer. The room fell into awkward silence, and my dad and I exchanged confused looks. Despite the palpable tension, he gently encouraged Gina to share what was weighing on her mind. Amidst her sobs, Gina began to recount how, a few years ago, I had supposedly tried to force myself on her, but she had kept it hidden to protect me. I was stunned, completely blindsided by the unexpected accusation. Before I could even grasp what was happening, Gina started elaborating on her fabricated story. She told my dad that after our vacation in Greece, where we had an argument about weight and height, I would constantly stare at her and attempt to enter her bedroom uninvited. I sat frozen in my chair as she continued to concoct tales of how I would try to barge in every time she took a shower or get uncomfortably close to her face when we were alone. She claimed she dreaded having me over every weekend because she feared I would behave the same way with the twins. I tried to defend myself, vehemently denying the baseless accusations and yelling at her for having the audacity to make up such lies, but Gina continued to cry as if she were the victim. She went on about how, as I grew older, I made her increasingly uncomfortable and, on one occasion when we were alone, I allegedly tried to force myself on her. My eyes widened in shock, and the blood drained from my face upon hearing such a serious accusation. My dad looked utterly confused and concerned, his eyes darting between me and Gina, clearly at a loss for words. Gina continued her story, claiming she had suffered in silence for years, afraid to speak up for the sake of the family. I yelled at Gina, calling her a psycho, insisting there was no way I had ever looked at her inappropriately, let alone touched her. Gina yelled back that she was done keeping her silence and needed to expose a monster like me. The twins began shouting furiously at me, accusing me of putting their mother through this and using words like rapist and molester. My head was spinning, and it all felt like a bad dream. I couldn't believe how a pleasant evening had turned into such wild accusations. I looked at my dad for support, but he remained quiet, clearly trying to process everything Gina had said. He asked her if what she had spoken was true, and Gina nodded, asserting that she would never lie to him about his own son and that, as his wife, he should believe her. While I tried to defend myself, my dad asked Gina why she hadn't spoken up earlier. She explained that she feared no one would believe her since I was a minor trying to do inappropriate things with her. As a stepmother who had married my dad, she felt people would dismiss her words. She claimed she had to bear this silently to protect the family. I was crying at this point, begging my dad not to believe her. I never imagined Gina could fabricate such atrocious lies, especially after what she had put me through over the years. Unfortunately, Gina's manipulation had strained my relationship with my dad, and he seemed torn between trusting me and believing his wife. The twins, influenced by their mother's narrative, supported Gina's false accusations and yelled at me to leave their house. I yelled back that it was my dad's place and they shouldn't believe their mother's lies. My dad, amidst the chaos, looked up at me and told me to leave the house until the matter was resolved. It felt like a punch to the gut. Being rejected by my own father, who chose to believe his second wife over me, left me hurt, confused, and betrayed. I packed my belongings and left the home I once thought was mine. I flew straight to my mother, who was shocked to see me at her doorstep. When I told her everything, she was furious and ready to confront my stepmom. But I asked her not to, knowing how unpredictable and dangerous Gina could be. If Gina could concoct such wild lies to get me kicked out of my dad's house because she was upset about the inheritance, she could do much more to ruin my life. I couldn't risk having her in my life any longer, which is why I decided to cut off my dad permanently. Since he chose to believe her, he didn't deserve to have me in his life. Later, my mom told me that my dad called her to express his shame in having a son like me and declared he wanted nothing to do with me. Despite her attempts to defend me, it was in vain. My dad's side of the family, convinced by Gina's story, also attacked my mom, accusing her of raising a pervert. I can't even begin to fathom the pain my mom felt hearing such words about her son. The damage was done, and Gina had won. I wish I could say my life improved after cutting her off, but it didn't. Gina and the twins continued bombarding me with vile text messages, threatening that I should stay away from my dad forever. It got so bad that I had to change my number to escape them. Even after that, things didn't get better. Gina's actions left me terrified of being around any woman, fearing I would be falsely accused again and lose my job and career. I was scared to meet anyone or go on dates. Throughout this ordeal, my mom stood by me and believed me. I went through severe depressive and suicidal episodes, and my mom flew in to live with me for a couple of months to make sure I was all right. Slowly, my mental health improved, and I started to rebuild my life. Eventually, I met a wonderful woman named Mara, who brought joy back into my life. She has completely changed my life and my mom adores her. Mara and my mom mean everything to me, and thanks to them I continue to live my life with purpose. Just a week ago I received a call from an unknown number. Thinking it might be Amazon, I answered. To my shock, it was my dad. I was stunned to hear his voice after nearly 7 years. He sounded old. When I asked how he got my new number, he dodged the question and asked if I was doing okay. I remained silent and then told him not to bother me again since I had nothing to say to him. That's when my dad broke down and started crying. He begged for my forgiveness, admitting how wrong he was to abandon his own son. My curiosity was piqued, so I waited for him to explain. My dad then revealed that Gina had been cheating on him with his best friend for years. When he confronted her with proof, she stopped hiding and confessed she was tired of being married to a pathetic man like him. Gina admitted she had only married him for his money and despised being with him. When my dad pressed her further, she confessed to fabricating all the accusations against me because she hated me and wanted all his wealth for herself and her daughters. As you can imagine, my dad divorced her, and she got nothing from the marriage due to her affair. Despite her lawyers fighting for alimony, my dad said he had been waiting to divorce Gina so he could officially reach out to me and apologize for what he put me through. He expressed his desire to make up for lost time and rebuild our father-son relationship. At the mention of father and son, I couldn't help but scoff. I told him that he was no father of mine after how quickly he abandoned me for his wife's nasty accusations. I told him I wanted nothing to do with him and that he should stop bothering me. I ended the call and hoped he got the message. Since then, I've been bombarded with calls from my dad and his side of the family, who I don't even talk to, saying that my dad has suffered enough and that I'm just making it harder on him. Their messages leave me feeling conflicted. Am I the bad guy for refusing to talk to my dad after he cut me off due to Gina's false accusations? Update 1, my post was locked, but hopefully it's okay now. I've posted the link and tried my best with spacing. I'm on mobile. To everyone who offered support and advice, thank you so much. Your words helped me see things more clearly. I'm not just furious at my dad for believing my stepmother over me but also for all those years she harassed me while he did nothing to protect me. I was just a child and she blackmailed and manipulated me while I kept quiet. I think it's time I open up to my mom and let her know exactly what I went through because I know she'll understand. Update 2. Hi everyone, it's been a week since my last update. For those concerned about my mental health, I'm doing okay. Thank you for your kindness. I booked tickets for my mom to come visit me so I could tell her and Mara everything. They already sensed something was up. I started by telling them about Dad's contact after all these years, which shocked my mom. She asked why he reached out, and I explained. She had no idea he had gone through a divorce and was furious at Gina for what she put everyone through. Then I told them about how Gina would manipulate me when I was just 12 years old. I recounted how she bullied me when Dad wasn't around and threatened to divorce him if I ever told him. I didn't realize how traumatic these events were until I began to open up about them one by one. By the time I finished, I had tears streaming down my face. Mara and my mom were crying quietly as well. My mom immediately hugged me, repeatedly saying that I shouldn't have kept this all in and that it was okay to share. I cried for half an hour while my mom held me. Mara also told me that no child should have gone through what I did and that it was completely fine if I chose never to speak to my dad again since he should have protected me. My mom nodded, saying I had no obligations to explain anything to my dad because when I needed him the most, he chose to believe his wife over me. The only reason he was reaching out now was that he was lonely and had no family left. That's when I realized they were right. My dad perhaps never really loved me because if he did, he would have never believed I was capable of such things. Since then, I've felt much lighter after sharing my past with Gina out loud with my mom and Mara. I've blocked my dad and will continue to block any other family member who tries to interject in my life. I owe no explanations to those who chose to abandon me. Update 3. Wow, it's been 6 months since I wrote this post, and I can't believe how much my life has changed since then. I want to start by sharing some happy news. I proposed to Mara, and she said yes. My mom is thrilled for us, and we're considering moving closer to her because the schools are better there. Since both of us can work from anywhere, it makes sense for our future family. Thanks to advice from people on Reddit, I've also started therapy. It's helping me feel better, step by step. I'm trying to focus on the positive aspects of my life, like Mara and my mom. They've always been there for me, and I'm deeply grateful for their support. The past has been tough, but I'm looking forward to a brighter future, free from all the lies and drama.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
Karen demands VIP table claiming to know the owner, but I'm the owner, and she was left crying with a $4,000 bill after my revenge. Karen storms into the restaurant, screaming that she knows the owner and that we must give her and her group of pals the VIP table reserved for celebrities. The trouble is, I own the restaurant and have no idea who this lady is. But I decided to play along and see what happened. During the dinner, one of the girls asked me whether I thought my life was meaningless because I worked as a waiter. That's when I realized all bets were out, and I was going to exact my retribution. This is what I did. This occurred around Christmas and New Year's. My grandparents emigrated to Canada from Italy in the 1970s and established a restaurant. When they died, my parents took over the restaurant, which they grew and enlarged throughout the decades. I've been working at the restaurant since I was 15. As my parents became older, they retired and became snowbirds, spending the winters in Florida. They sold the restaurant to me a few years ago, but they kept a tiny percentage of the stock as a supplementary source of income in addition to their savings. As soon as I took possession, I modernized the old place. I rebuilt the restaurant, altered the logo, and contacted local and national newspapers to place advertisements. I invited food critics, bloggers, and vloggers. It was slow at first, and I began to fear that the loan I took out to undertake all of this was the worst mistake I'd ever made, that I had ruined 3 generations of a family company. But soon, it began to work. A local semi-famous YouTuber included us in one of his videos, which prompted more people to visit and review us. Even on a Monday, we were quickly seeing 5 to 10 times the regular volume of activity. We became a destination for large events, and it was not uncommon for a celebrity to stop up on certain evenings. I even invited certain high-profile clients to visit and cook for our guests. This cost a fortune, so we were completely filled for the holidays. People had to make reservations in July to get a table in December. It took years to get to this point. When things become busy, I don't simply sit in the back office. I'm on the floor doing whatever needs to be done, whether it's greeting customers, bussing tables, or mopping the floors. On nights with high-profile guests or events, I wear a jacket and take charge. One night, 6 women walked in. 5 of them appeared to be in their early 20s, with the leader looking to be in her mid-20s. My best assumption was that she was an elder sister of one of the females or an older sorority sister to incoming college students. I was greeting them at the entrance, and as they approached, Queen Bee Karen was telling the baby Karens how fantastic this restaurant is, how delicious the cuisine is, and how there might even be celebrities there. When she approached me, she explained that she required a table for 6. I responded, "Of course, can I get the name on the reservation?" She stared at me. She responded, "Oh, I didn't make one, but it's okay. The owner is a personal friend of mine. He said he always keeps 1 or 2 tables open for special guests and we can have one of those tonight." This is true for many high-profile restaurants, and I've been doing it recently as well. But I had no idea who this woman was, and she had never discussed any of this with me. I understood she was attempting to get in without a reservation, but she had chosen the worst person to try this with. I told her, "I am sorry, but we cannot seat anyone without a reservation. As you can see, we do not have any seats available." I didn't want to go all out and say, "I'm the owner, and we have never spoken before, so I never promised you anything." But I didn't want to embarrass her in front of the other girls she was with at the time. She then instructed one of the other girls to take a picture of me. She announced that she would speak with the owner and ensure that I was either scrubbing toilets or fired by the end of the week. The other girls behind her joined in, saying things like, "Yeah, kiss your minimum wage job goodbye." I wasn't sure if they were in on it with her or if they truly believed she knew the owner. Queen Bee Karen then said, "Look, you can either give us a table or I can make your life very difficult. This is not worth losing your job." She kept pointing, trying to belittle me, and then saying things like, "Obviously you aren't anyone here, because if you were, You would know who I am and never try to tell me anything other than yes or, of course. She was constantly attempting to put me down and take that table. At this time, it had been a hard day for me, and from my perspective, I had 3 options. Number 1, I could inform her that I am the owner and call her out on all of this. Number 2, I could simply hand her the table and let things go. Or, third, I could teach Queen Bee Karen and her minions a lesson. I selected option 3. I smiled at her and said, "Of course, ma'am, please follow me." I handed her one of the 3 tables we leave free in case a celebrity walks in, which occurs occasionally. I told her, "I apologize for everything and you're right, it would be simpler just to give you the table." I also assured her that the first 3 rounds of drinks would be free. I seated them down and personally served them. As they sat, I told them, "We need one of your credit cards and IDs just to keep on file, and we'll return them to you before you leave." Queen Karen handed me her card and informed the baby Karen minions, "Tonight is on me." I took their orders, gave them their free beverages, and informed them that due to how busy we were tonight, the meal may be delayed. The females only worried about the free drinks. They ordered 3 rounds and still hadn't received any food. They eventually called and asked me to check on it, all while giving me the worst attitude since they arrived. I told them I will look into it, but also asked if they wanted additional drinks. They ordered 2 more rounds. They were sloshed by the time the appetizers arrived, having done nothing but drink on an empty stomach for the majority of the night and just eating salads. As more food arrived, more beverages were ordered. What these girls didn't realize was that they were at our VIP table, which normally costs a few $1,000s to sit at, but I didn't charge them for it. Except for the first 3 rounds, I charged them for all of the extremely costly cocktails they had throughout the evening. Furthermore, the table they were sitting at, as previously stated, was VIP, thus the menus were different. Prices are not displayed on these menus. This is a restaurant industry trade secret. They also offered higher-end menu items such as white truffle, black caviar meals, and specially imported West Coast oysters, among others. At one point during the night, I honestly began to question what I was doing. I worried I was going too far with these poor girls, they might not know any better. But certain things encouraged me throughout the night, such as when one of the baby Karens questioned whether I thought my life was pointless because all I ever became was a server. Also, one of the other staff told me that they were planning how to mess with me, believing that they could do so whenever they wanted and that I would always give them a table. I overheard them say, "He's cute, but I wouldn't date a waiter like that. He is such a pushover." There were other comments like that throughout the night, so I continued with their life lesson. By the end of the night, each female had built up a bill ranging from $500 to $600. I handed Queen Karen the bill for $4,232.23, which included tax and tip. I've never seen somebody sober up this soon. She went from smiling and giggling with her buddies to almost in tears. She immediately summoned me over and asked whether this was a joke. I took the bill, looked it over, and apologized. "I'll get you the correct bill amount." Again, she seemed completely relieved, assuming she had received someone else's bill, and called me a effing idiot, before continuing to talk to her pals. When I returned to give her the right bill, she flipped out again. It was only a question. "Is there something wrong on this bill that you didn't order?" She and the girls were stunned and went over every single line of the bill, including the initial several lines that listed their original 3 rounds as complimentary. They then got out their phones and went over everything 100 times, adding it all up. Queen Bee, visibly startled, just remarked, "1 second, I need to use the restroom." Part of me feared she'd dine and dash and leave the baby Karens with the tab, but I discreetly reminded her that we had her ID and credit card, without making it too obvious. I was concerned that she would run out of money. 10 minutes later, she returns with new makeup, clearly crying, and tells me all about how poor the food was, how dreadful the drinks were, and so on, demanding that I at the very least cut the cost in half. She went on to say that the baby Karens would help, despite the fact that she had previously informed them that the night would be hers. Then, as if a light bulb went off in her head, she brought up her alleged relationship with the owner again, as if it would give me extra motivation to lower the amount in half. I smiled as I told her, "No, simply no. I can't change the bill." She takes out her phone and shows me a series of text messages from someone named after my restaurant, followed by the word owner. I instantly grasped what she had been doing in the bathroom, most likely changing one of the other Karen minions' contact names and erasing prior text to establish this new script. I reviewed the messages and clicked on the contact information before telling her, "That's not the owner's cell phone number." Her response was, "He has multiple phones for business, of course. You do not know all of his numbers." I replied, "How about this? If we call him and he says it's okay to take 50% off the bill, then I'll do it. Her response was to begin ranting and screaming, which drew the attention of the few remaining patrons, and I knew it was time to finish this. I told her in a less conciliatory tone, "Cut the crap, little girl. You do not know the owner. You've never been here before, and if you continue ranting, I'll call the cops." Her tone changed as she attempted to defend herself as best she could. My response to her lame retort was, "My grandfather established this restaurant. My family has been running this establishment for centuries. I've worked here for nearly my entire life. I am the sole owner of this restaurant, and I have never seen you, heard of you, or made any promises to a stranger I have never seen before tonight." The little Karens were frozen and had no idea how to react. Queen Bee was in tears. I added, "Now, I provided you the table you wanted, one of these particularly reserved tables for high-end clientele, which I did not charge you for, as well as 3 rounds of free drinks. If you do not pay your account, I will call the cops and give them your identification." Karen signed the bill in tears, and the tiny Karens reached into their wallets to hand her whatever cash they had, which was probably a couple $100, with the promise to repay her more. 2 days later, an angry man arrives at my restaurant and requests that one of my bartenders talk with me. I was in the back office working, so he had to wait for about a half hour. She was with him too, but she kept her head down. I took them both to my office and showed him highlights from the security cameras, which had particularly high-quality audio because they were in the VIP area. We needed to keep good records in that region due to previous unconnected accidents. I showed him the majority of it, their remarks, orders, everything. When all was said and done, he rushed out with her, yelling at her the entire way. I have not seen or heard from any of them since, but the initial bill I gave them, which did not include the $120 oysters, is framed on my desk. As a side note, I did not lose as much money on the table in 3 rounds of drinks as you might expect. The table was intended to be empty anyway, so I didn't lose anything because I hadn't expected to gain anything in the first place. The cost of the meal and other drinks more than compensated for the loss in the first 3 rounds. So now that you know everything, am I the jerk? Probably the most astonishing thing about the Karens in this situation, aside from the money, trying to muscle their way into securing a seat and avoiding paying the bill, was their perspective on the world. That solitary statement concerning the OP's, original poster's, inadequacy as a waiter definitely stood out. It seems that OP was going to loosen up on his entire vengeance plan, but then one of the baby Karens asked him if he felt his life was meaningless because all he had become was a waitress. That has to be one of the most insanely entitled viewpoints we've ever seen on this channel. It may not be as exciting or insane as some of the other stories, but the fact that she actually sees the world in this way is simply sick. There is absolutely nothing wrong with having a job, regardless of the income. This occurs frequently with jobs such as janitors, and I despise it when individuals believe they are superior just because they do not work in those positions. There is nothing wrong with becoming a janitor. I don't understand that mindset, but in this situation, she not only feels that way, but she also wants to mock him for doing a difficult job, such as being a waiter. Or at least that's what she believes he's doing. One more thing. I'm happy this story ended on a somewhat gratifying note, with the father attempting to reverse the situation but becoming more enraged with his daughter than the restaurant owner. The only thing that scared me out was that the restaurant was recording audio of the folks sitting at that table. I would probably avoid going to a restaurant if I knew my talks were being recorded. Anyway, I'm glad it worked out for the OP, but please tell me how you would have handled the matter if it were your restaurant and these were your customers. Was the OP a jerk or not, and why?
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. Recently, through my wife's friend, I accidentally discovered that she had been unfaithful for the past 20 years. I decided to end our marriage. My wife, 44 female, and I, 43 male, have shared 20 years of marriage, and our journey began when we were high school sweethearts. She was a senior, and I was a junior. Our relationship endured a long-distance phase during her first 2 years of college, while I finished high school and completed a year at community college. Eventually we attended college in the same city, and from that point we have been inseparable, living together and building our life. We married the summer after my college graduation, and overall, our marriage has been wonderful. However, I recently initiated a divorce after uncovering that she had been involved with multiple men during those 2 long-distance years. Just after Christmas we had a small reunion with a few of my wife's college friends. It was a cozy evening filled with laughter and reminiscing as we caught up over dinner and shared memories. During the conversation, my wife casually mentioned that we met in high school. She didn't clarify that we were dating back then, just that we had known each other since high school. One of her old college roommates exclaimed how remarkable it was that we met so young, had our wild college years, and still ended up together. I played along, jokingly saying I wasn't sure if my wife was as wild as I had been. At that moment, the roommate began to share a story, but my wife abruptly cut her off, saying she felt uncomfortable. Her sudden reaction made my senses tingle with suspicion. I decided to clarify things and mentioned that we actually started dating in high school and remained together throughout her entire college experience. An awkward silence fell over the table, and the rest of the evening was noticeably tense. As we were leaving, one of her other roommates pulled me aside and suggested I should have an honest conversation with my wife about what really happened during her college years. On the way home from dinner, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling I had. So I asked my wife about what her roommate had hinted at. She kind of blew me off, saying it wasn't a big deal. I told her it was important that she be honest with me, but she brushed it off again, insisting it wasn't important. Her dismissive attitude only heightened my suspicion. When we got home, I decided to take a firm stand. I told her I was going to stay at my brother's house until she was ready to talk about what had really happened during her college years. The next day she came over, visibly anxious. She finally admitted to sleeping with several men during her first 2 years of college. She tried to downplay it, saying she didn't consider it a big deal at the time because we were long distance and she didn't think our high school romance would last. This revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. I pressed for more details, feeling a mix of anger and betrayal. She confessed that it was at least 10 different men, including at least 3 guys she had introduced to me as friends during my weekend visits, and 1 guy she was still in contact with. Hearing this, I felt a surge of emotions: anger, sadness, betrayal. I knew our marriage couldn't survive this. I told her I wanted a divorce and would start the paperwork as soon as possible. True to my word, I began the process on January 2nd. Her attempts to downplay her actions and dismiss my feelings only solidified my decision. This wasn't just about the infidelity. It was about the lies and the disrespect that had spanned decades. Her family and most of my family are telling me I shouldn't throw away my marriage over a few mistakes. They keep saying that everyone makes mistakes and that I should forgive her for the sake of our long history together. But to me, this isn't just about a few mistakes. It's about a pattern of behavior that spanned years. Cheating on me with multiple men for 2 years is not something I can overlook, no matter when it happened. The fact that she continued to maintain relationships with these guys right in front of me, even introducing them as friends, is an unacceptable level of disrespect. Our children are 17 and 19, practically adults, and I believe they will understand why I need to end the marriage. They've seen us as a loving couple, and I hope they realize that my decision is about preserving my self-respect and integrity. I feel like I'm losing my mind with the number of people telling me to overlook years of infidelity and decades of lies. Everywhere I turn, I hear voices urging me to forgive and forget, to salvage what we've built. They tell me I'm being unreasonable, that I should focus on the good times and the life we've shared. But how can I, when every memory is now tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal? It's not just the act of cheating. It's the deceit, the lies, the continuation of friendships with those she cheated with. How am I supposed to trust her again? How am I supposed to look at her the same way, knowing what she did, and how she dismissed my feelings when I confronted her? I keep questioning myself, wondering if I'm overreacting, if I'm being too harsh. But then I remember the pain I felt when she admitted to her affairs. The anger and betrayal that surged through me. I remember the nights spent wondering how she could introduce me to those men. How she could maintain those friendships without a hint of guilt. It's not something I can simply get over. It's a fundamental breach of trust that has shattered our marriage. Am I wrong for leaving? I don't think so. I feel like I'm fighting for my dignity. For my right to not be lied to. To not be disrespected in such a profound way. It's not about revenge or holding a grudge. It's about acknowledging that some lines, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. I'm writing this because my wife and a few of her friends have been telling me it's normal to sleep with other people in a long-distance relationship, and that I'm the odd one out for not doing the same. I felt like I was being gaslit and needed an outside perspective. Since we live in a state with a waiting period to finalize a divorce, I thought it would be wise to get some insight before things are set in stone. After hearing these comments, I see a handful of people agreeing that it's common to sleep around in long-distance relationships, but they seem to be a minority. During those 2 years of college, we saw each other a couple of weekends a month. I lived about 3 hours away from her college, so while it was long distance, it wasn't like we were separated by the entire country. We didn't go months without seeing each other. The 3 guys I met while she was in college were introduced to me during parties. These weren't formal introductions, just casual meetups at social gatherings. The topic of me being her boyfriend never really came up, so I have no idea if they knew we were in a relationship. One of these guys is still in our lives because he married a mutual friend from college. He isn't some secret contact she's been messaging on the side. He's someone we've both been in touch with regularly for years. After finding out about my wife's infidelity, I spoke to him a few times to understand his side. He told me he had no idea we were dating back then and has since blocked my wife on social media out of respect for me. Some people have questioned how her college roommates didn't figure out the timeline at our wedding. The answer lies in how we handled our marriage celebrations. My wife and I had a very small ceremony with just close family in Texas. Later we went back to the East Coast and threw a big party for our friends. We skipped the typical wedding reception traditions where couples share details about how they met and their journey together. Because of this, her roommates never pieced together that we started dating before she went to college. They seemed to assume that we only started dating during the year we both lived in the same city, and then moved in together. This gap in their understanding explains why they never questioned the timeline or suspected any infidelity. I was open to therapy or some kind of attempt to save the marriage. I genuinely believed that with some effort we might be able to work through this. But her constant insistence that what she did was perfectly normal and that I'm the one who's overreacting has been too much for me to handle. She keeps telling me that sleeping with other people in a long-distance relationship is commonplace, and that I'm being unreasonable. The only time she showed any remorse or even offered to reconcile was when I started filing the divorce paperwork. That brief moment of contrition quickly evaporated, and in the last week, she's reverted to her original stance, insisting that she's right and I'm overreacting. This back and forth is why I feel like I'm being gaslit. It seems so obvious to me that her actions were a major betrayal. Yet I've got my wife and others telling me that it's normal and that I'm the one who's making a big deal out of nothing. Her dismissive attitude only adds to my confusion and frustration. I tried to communicate how deeply her infidelity hurt me, hoping she would understand the gravity of the situation. Instead, she minimizes my feelings, treating them as an overreaction to something trivial. It's like she's rewriting the rules of our relationship and expecting me to accept them without question. This constant invalidation of my emotions is maddening. I feel like I'm being manipulated into doubting my own perceptions and feelings. Her refusal to acknowledge the seriousness of her actions, coupled with her attempts to normalize infidelity, only deepens the rift between us. It's not just the cheating itself, but her inability to recognize why it's a big deal and why I feel so betrayed. I'm at a point where I need to protect my own mental and emotional well-being. I can't continue in a marriage where my feelings are dismissed and my trust is shattered. Her lack of genuine remorse and her insistence that I'm the one who's out of line make it impossible for me to see a path forward together. I'm not overreacting. I'm standing up for myself and my right to a respectful, honest relationship. I'm not getting a paternity test unless my kids ask for it themselves. I have no doubts about their biological connection to me, and even if a test showed otherwise, it wouldn't change how I feel about them. I love them more than anything, and my wife's infidelity doesn't alter the fact that they've been my kids for 19 years. They will always be my kids no matter what until the day I stop breathing. We were definitely exclusively dating at the time. First of all, dating culture was a lot different 20-ish years ago, and exclusivity was pretty much the default for most people. There wasn't this open relationship or casual dating mindset that seems more prevalent today. It was understood that if you were with someone, you were with them alone. Second, before she left for college, we had a long and difficult conversation about maintaining our relationship long distance. It wasn't an easy discussion, but she was adamant about staying together. She even joked that her dad would come after me if I started sleeping around with other girls at my school. That joke carried a lot of weight, indicating how serious she was about us staying faithful to each other. Another clear indicator was the situation with my senior prom. She couldn't attend because she was away at college, and when I suggested going with a platonic female friend, she got very upset. Her reaction showed how much our relationship meant to her, and reinforced the idea that we were exclusively together. To avoid hurting her feelings, I ended up skipping my prom and spent the night hanging out with her instead. While we might not have explicitly used the word exclusive, all these reasons combined with the nature of our relationship before she left for college made it clear that we were committed to each other. The expectation of fidelity was implicit in our actions and discussions. I followed up with the friend who suggested I should have an honest conversation with my wife. She revealed that 10 guys would be on the low end, and mentioned that there was at least one pregnancy scare during those years, which I had no idea about. Honestly, the number of guys isn't the main issue for me. What really matters is that my wife seems completely incapable of understanding why her actions were wrong and why I feel so deeply betrayed. It would make a huge difference if she showed any genuine desire to fix this, but she hasn't. Throughout our conversations, she consistently dismissed my feelings, telling me I was overreacting to what she considered totally normal behavior. She didn't express any regret or consideration for the hurt she caused until she realized I was serious about filing for divorce. Only then did she get defensive and angry. But even in that moment, it was clear her concern was more about the consequences than about my feelings. The lack of remorse was evident. She didn't offer to fix things or suggest ways we could work through this until I had already started the paperwork and notified her that I had a lawyer. It wasn't about repairing our relationship, it was about damage control. This response reinforced my belief that she doesn't grasp the depth of her betrayal. It's not just about the infidelity itself, but about her ongoing disregard for my feelings and our marriage. Her dismissive attitude, especially in the face of such a serious issue, left me no choice but to move forward with the divorce. I believe we can manage co-parenting. Our kids are older, and I've been saving for their college and post-high school expenses for years, so custody and financial issues shouldn't be a major hurdle. We're both financially stable and earn good incomes. I'm open to therapy if she's willing, but at this point it feels more about becoming effective co-parents and finding closure rather than saving our marriage. I've taken steps to move forward with the separation. I hired a lawyer who drafted an intent to separate documents and sent it to her via certified mail. This isn't an official divorce paper filed with the state. It's more of a preliminary step, ensuring she has the opportunity to hire her own lawyer if she wishes to contest it. The actual divorce process will likely span several months. For now, I'm not fully moved out. I've been staying at my brother's place while I figure out a more permanent living situation. Regarding the timeline, the dinner with her friends occurred on the 26th. That night I went to my brother's house to cool off and give her some space to reflect. Over the next 4 or 5 days we had multiple conversations and it became clear that she didn't think she had done anything wrong. If she had shown any remorse, regret, or basic consideration for my feelings, I might have reconsidered and waited. But her dismissive attitude left me no choice. So I found a divorce lawyer and we quickly filled out the standard intent to separate agreements, which were sent the same day. Even now we are not legally divorced, and I'm not certain if there is an official legal concept of separation in my state. Nonetheless, I've made it clear that this process is happening, and I've started the necessary steps to move forward. Update 1. Let's dive into what I discovered about her college years. After several counseling sessions with my wife and conversations with 2 of her former roommates, it became apparent that her roommates had suspected something was amiss back in college. They mentioned that the situation seemed off and likely involved cheating. My wife had told them that we both had some wild times in college but had worked things out before we got married, so they never felt the need to bring it up. The roommate who pulled me aside during the dinner was particularly uncomfortable with the fact that my wife had clearly never discussed this with me and felt I deserved to know. Regarding the men she was involved with, it turns out that the introductions to some of these guys weren't intentional. One of the men she slept with ended up dating and eventually marrying one of our mutual friends from college. This was the guy she remained in contact with. In our counseling sessions, my wife initially tried to shift the blame onto me, suggesting that I had pushed her into those situations. However, she has since acknowledged that it was wrong. When I visited her during college, she often planned for us to stay in her room or hang out alone. But I wanted to experience college parties, as I had missed out on that during high school and community college. She didn't expect me to meet the guys she had been with, but they were often at these parties and she felt she couldn't avoid it. While I still think it's incredibly disrespectful, it's somewhat less egregious than if she had intentionally paraded me in front of them. The whole situation has been a complex web of half-truths and omissions, which makes it all the more difficult to process. Her friends suspected but didn't intervene, and my wife managed to maintain this facade for years. Most of our therapy sessions have centered around why I see her infidelity as a significant betrayal, while she doesn't. Initially, she rationalized her actions by saying that none of these men were in relationships with her. They were mostly one-night stands or friends with benefits. In her view, these encounters didn't qualify as a big deal since they weren't romantic relationships. Her words, not mine. From my perspective, the nature of the relationships was irrelevant. We never agreed that such behavior was acceptable. In fact, she had actively discouraged me from doing the same. The double standard was glaring, and added to my sense of betrayal. As we delved deeper into this issue over the course of 2 therapy sessions and after she consulted with some friends, my wife began to see things differently. She now acknowledges that her actions were a breach of our trust and the foundation of our relationship. This new shared understanding has allowed us to discuss the situation more openly and honestly, moving from heated arguments to productive conversations. This shift in our dynamic gives me some hope for our future as co-parents. While the prospect of saving our marriage feels out of reach, being able to communicate honestly about our past can help us establish a healthier relationship moving forward. This is crucial for the well-being of our children and for navigating the complexities of co-parenting effectively. Now here's why I'm 100% committed to getting a divorce. 2 pivotal things came to light that made it clear I needed to end the marriage. First, about 10 years ago, we hit a rough patch and went through a period of almost 2 years without any intimacy. She had mentioned that our physical relationship was becoming monotonous, so I tried to bring some excitement into it. Nothing extreme, just some light roleplay and items you'd find at a novelty store. However, it turned out she was fixated on some intimate experiences from her college days, which she is not comfortable discussing. She wanted me to recreate those experiences, but when I did, it made her feel awkward and guilty because it reminded her of other men she had been with. The fact that she insists these experiences were meaningless, yet they still affect our marriage, tells me they were more significant than she's willing to admit. Second, she confessed to flirting with coworkers during business trips since the pandemic ended. Although she claims nothing physical happened, it did progress to the point where she went on a date with one of her male colleagues. For me, that was the absolute deal breaker. These revelations shattered any remaining trust I had. The first issue showed me that past experiences were still haunting our present despite her claims otherwise. The second issue made it clear that she was willing to cross boundaries again, even after everything we had been through. These 2 factors combined made it impossible for me to see any hope for salvaging our marriage. We have informed our children that we are getting a divorce. We explained to them that it stemmed from some bad decisions made during college, decisions that we've been unable to move past. During the conversation, my 19-year-old, who is currently in college, directly asked if I had been unfaithful to my wife while she was away at school. This question caught my wife off guard, but she bravely admitted to our children that she was the one who cheated. We have both agreed to refrain from sharing any more details with the kids. It's essential to protect them from the more painful aspects of our past. I reassured them that despite the separation, both of us remain fully committed to being there for them. I emphasized that we are in therapy to ensure we handle the divorce in the best possible way for our family's well-being. Furthermore, I made it clear to the kids that if they ever feel the need to talk about the situation, whether with us or a therapist, they have my full support. I want them to know they can express their feelings and seek help without any hesitation. It's crucial for them to understand that their emotional health is a top priority for both of us, and we are doing everything we can to navigate this difficult time together as a family. We've begun discussions with a mediator to figure out the best way to proceed with the divorce. Unless something changes, it looks like we can part ways amicably. Both of us are financially stable, free of major debts, and with our kids being older, custody isn't a significant concern. The past few months have been tough, but I'm managing. I'm actually thankful that my last post gained so much attention. It validated my feelings and pushed me to seek counseling with my wife. To be fair, my 19-year-old daughter has had her share of difficult relationships. She's been hurt by boyfriends who either cheated on her or abruptly left her for someone else. Given her past experiences with untrustworthy men, it's understandable why her initial thought might be that I was the one who cheated. Adding to her suspicion is the fact that I was the one who left the house. In her eyes, seeing her father leave the family home might have seemed like an admission of guilt or wrongdoing. Her experiences have understandably shaped her perspective, making it easier for her to believe that I could be at fault. When cheating came up, my wife made it clear that she was the one who being unfaithful. To be honest, I'm not overly concerned about the narrative here. From what I can tell, my wife hasn't said anything negative about me to our kids. Moreover, considering her recent admissions of flirting and cheating, along with her readiness to file for a joint, amicable divorce after just 6 weeks and 3 counseling sessions, it seems she was more prepared to move on than I was. This readiness on her part makes the logistical aspects of the divorce smoother, but it does sting a bit to see her having an easier time walking away from a 20-year marriage than I am. I'm fairly certain she's already looking for a new partner. During our meeting with the equitable divorce mediator, she explicitly mentioned that we are still married until the divorce is finalized and that any infidelity before that date could jeopardize our amicable settlement. This statement struck me as somewhat ironic given that our divorce is rooted in infidelity. Nevertheless, my soon-to-be ex was visibly annoyed when this topic came up. Additionally, I suspect that my current living situation, crashing in the guest room, might be hindering her prospects of moving on quickly. At the end of the day, I'm doing my best to come to terms with the end of our marriage. I've been attending therapy on my own, in addition to our couples sessions to help me cope. I'm mentally bracing myself for the likelihood of encountering the coworker she only dated again. However, I'm hopeful that I'll find a new place and move out before the divorce is finalized. If everything goes smoothly with the mediator, we should be divorced by summer. I'll have my own place and she can just date whoever she wants. Update 2. My wife and I have finalized our divorce and everything is now official. We managed to have an uncontested, amicable divorce with minimal disagreements. Our lawyers collaborated to draft the plan through mediation, and a judge signed off on it a few weeks ago. Ultimately, the divorce process was straightforward. The only significant complication was related to our 17-year-old who was adamant about staying with me due to the deterioration of their relationship with my ex-wife. Initially, my wife resisted, ready to challenge the uncontested divorce. However, our son made it clear that she could either allow him a few months to process and rebuild their relationship or force him to stay with her until he turned 18 and risk never seeing him again. Although I felt my son's stance was a bit harsh, it did prompt my wife to back down. We moved forward with the agreement that I would have primary physical custody until his birthday later this year. Throughout this period, I've encouraged my son to remain open to mending his relationship with his mother. Despite the actions she took before he was born, she did care for and love him for 17 years. As the divorce proceedings advanced, I noticed my son spending more time with my ex-wife, which gives me hope that they will eventually reconcile. This has been a challenging time for all of us, but I'm optimistic that, with time, they will be able to rebuild their bond. In the end, we divided our retirement funds and investments equally, 50-50. My wife really liked the house, whereas I didn't, so she kept the house and most of the furnishings. To balance things out, she took out a mortgage to pay me back for half of the equity and half of the estimated replacement value of the furniture. Most of our other belongings were easy to split. She kept her car, I kept mine, and we divided our personal items like my music gear and her hobby equipment along with clothing and personal effects. For anything that was harder to divide, we agreed to sell it and split the profits. Thankfully, we had already documented most of our valuable items and electronics for an insurance rider we added to our home insurance a few years ago, which made this process smoother. Things have been going well for me personally. Both of my kids spend most of their time at my place, and we have maintained a close relationship, which was my biggest concern during the divorce. I'm relieved and grateful that this bond remains strong. I've moved into a new house that I truly love, a place that feels like a fresh start. In a nod to my midlife crisis, I traded in my old minivan for a sleek Lexus LC550, a decision that has brought a surprising amount of joy. On another positive note, a woman at work, someone from a different department so we don't work directly together, invited me out for a coffee date. I was upfront with her, explaining that I'm not ready to date just yet. She was understanding and graciously offered to take a rain check, expressing her willingness to go out with me when I'm ready. This invitation was a pleasant surprise. She's incredibly smart, has a great sense of humor, and our professional roles are distant enough that there's no awkwardness at work. My ex and I are still attending couples counseling, but now it's focused on achieving closure for our marriage and ensuring we can co-parent effectively. These sessions have been invaluable for processing everything and maintaining a healthy, positive environment despite the circumstances. However, they've also confirmed that divorce was the right decision. It's become evident through our discussions that my wife began dating as soon as the divorce process started, indicating that whatever love we had was already fading. I'm pretty sure the coworker she claimed was just a friend even dropped her off at our recent session. Surprisingly, this didn't really upset me, which is a clear sign that I too was ready to move on from the marriage. In the end, healing from the betrayal will take time, but I feel like I'm making good progress and can confidently say that the divorce was the right choice. I've shed more tears in the past 4 months than in the last 20 years combined, but for the past month, I've genuinely felt good about myself for the first time in a long while. I'm enjoying my newfound independence, staying busy helping my 17-year-old prepare for college in the fall and looking forward to a coffee date with a smart, funny woman in a month or two. The journey through our divorce taught me the value of honest communication. Looking back, I wish we had been more transparent with each other from the start. Honesty could have prevented some of the pain we both ended up feeling. It's a lesson I'll carry forward in all my future relationships, romantic or otherwise. Most importantly, I've discovered the strength within myself to rebuild and move on. Despite the heartache, I've started to feel genuinely good about myself again.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.